The hall smelled faintly of orchids and champagne, but under the glittering lights of my engagement ceremony, I felt like I couldn't breathe. My fiancé, Ethan, squeezed my hand lightly, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "Hey," he whispered, "relax, Anna. Tonight's supposed to be about us." I tried to smile, but I could feel my parents' eyes burning holes into me from across the hall. They stood together like they always did, a united front, sharp and cruel. My dad, Richard, leaned against the wall, his expensive watch glinting under the chandelier. My mom, Leia, kept her lips curved in that fake smile she wore like armor. They weren't here to celebrate me. They never were. I had been dreading this day, not because I wasn't happy to marry Ethan, but because I knew they'd use it. Every milestone in my life was their chance to remind me how little I mattered compared to my younger sister, Chloe, their golden child. Sure enough, just after the photographer announced a quick break before speeches, Dad motioned for me to follow him into the side hallway. I hesitated, but Ethan whispered, "It's fine. Go see what he wants." I stepped away, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor until the chatter of the guests faded behind me. Dad was leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone like this wasn't supposed to be my night at all. "Where's the $137,000, Anna?" His tone wasn't a question. It was an order. I blinked at him. "What? The wedding fund?" he said sharply, lowering his voice. "The money you've been saving for the past 4 years. Hand it over." My chest tightened. I'd worked 2 jobs for years to save that money. Late night shifts at the diner, early mornings at the bookstore. Barely enough sleep to function all so I could give myself something beautiful for once. That fund was the one thing that was mine. "Dad," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, "that's for my wedding. Ethan and I don't care." He cut me off coldly. "Chloe needs it." I froze. Of course it was Chloe. "Chloe needs a deposit for her condo," he explained like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Your sister's future comes first." "Her future?" I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "She already has a car, a designer wardrobe, and a full ride to college because of you two. I worked for this. I earned this." His face hardened, and before I could step back, he slammed his palm against the wall beside me. "You think we're going to let you waste that money on some tacky ceremony?" He spat. "You're lucky we're even letting you get married." My stomach churned. "No," I said firmly, clutching my engagement ring. "I'm not giving you the money." That's when Mom appeared, heels clicking like knives on tile. She smirked when she saw me standing there, cornered. "You really want to make a scene on your engagement night, Anna?" She drawled. "Give your father the money. You'll find another way to pay for your little fairy tale." I said, "No." My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. Mom tilted her head and laughed soft at first, then sharp enough to cut through me. "Eat dirt, Anna," she sneered. "That's all you deserve anyway." I took a shaky breath, trying to walk past them back into the hall. But Dad stepped forward and without warning kicked me hard in the stomach. I stumbled back against the wall, choking on my breath as pain shot through me. My hand flew instinctively to my stomach, my body curling in on itself. "Richard!" Ethan's voice boomed behind us. He had seen everything. The music in the hall stopped abruptly. A murmur rippled through the guests. I could hear gasps, whispered voices, the sharp clink of a dropped champagne glass. Dad turned around slowly, his face calm, as if he hadn't just kicked his own daughter on the night of her engagement. "Family business," he said coldly to Ethan. "Stay out of it." But Ethan didn't back down. He came to my side, gently helping me straighten up while glaring at my parents. "You're unbelievable," he hissed. "She's your daughter." "She's a burden," Mom replied without hesitation, folding her arms. "If she cared about this family, she'd do what's right." I wanted to scream, but the pain made it hard to breathe. Still, I forced the words out, low and steady. "You don't get my money." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me like I'd just cursed them, but I didn't flinch this time. Ethan's arm wrapped around me protectively, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. Somewhere deep down, something inside me cracked that night. The Anna who had begged for their approval, who had broken herself trying to earn scraps of love, died right there in that hallway under the orchids and champagne lights. I didn't know it then, but that kick was going to set off a chain of events none of us would come back from. Because if they wanted war, I was done playing the dutiful daughter. This was the last time they were ever going to make me feel powerless. I couldn't sleep that night. The engagement party ended hours ago. But the memory of my dad's kick and my mama's laughter kept replaying in my head. Like a scene burned into my skull. Ethan tried to convince me to rest. His voice soft, patient, loving, the exact opposite of the venom I grew up with. But my mind was a storm. Every insult, every dismissal, every sacrifice I had made just to be treated like garbage by the people who should have protected me. It all collided in my chest like wildfire. By 3:00 a.m., I was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, my laptop open, Ethan asleep on the couch nearby. I stared at my bank statements, scrolling through for years of exhaustion. That fund was more than just money. It was the proof that I had clawed my way out of their shadow. It represented freedom, choice, and dignity. Everything my parents swore I didn't deserve. And tonight, they tried to take it from me. But here's the thing my parents had forgotten after years of beating me down. I am my father's daughter. I learned to think like him, to calculate, to predict, to trap. And if Richard and Leah thought they could humiliate me and walk away untouched, they had severely underestimated me. I opened another folder on my laptop, one I'd been building for years without even realizing why. It held photos of Chloe's lavish condo and her fully paid car, all bought under my parents' name through money they had borrowed from our extended family. It held screenshots of texts where Dad had bragged about hiding assets to avoid paying taxes. It held proof of mom repurposing Chloe's student scholarship funds into Chloe's private shopping sprees. I'd never used any of this before. Part of me kept holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd wake up one day and treat me like their daughter instead of a pawn. But after last night, that hope was gone. I didn't want them in jail. Not yet. That would have been too simple, too merciful. I wanted something slower, something that tasted like poetry. The first step was Ethan. The next morning, I brewed coffee and laid it all out for him. The years of financial manipulation, the secrets, the stolen money. His jaw tightened with every word. They can't get away with this, Anna, he said finally, his voice trembling with anger. Not after last night. They won't, I whispered, sliding a printed photo across the table. It was Chloe posing in front of her condo, all smiles, holding champagne. This condo isn't in her name, it's in Dad's. And Dad doesn't know yet that the hoa he ignored for months filed a lien on the property. Ethan's eyes widened. Meaning? I smiled faintly, though my chest was still tight. With the right move, they'll lose it. Every last thing they've been funneling my savings into, gone. It wasn't enough, though. Losing a condo wouldn't break Richard and Leah. They lived on control, on power. To destroy them, I had to take away the one thing they loved more than money, their image, for decades. My parents built a reputation in our small town as the perfect family. The proud, successful couple with 2 daughters. One brilliant Chloe and one rebellious me. They had neighbors fooled, co-workers fooled, even church elders wrapped around their fingers. But reputations are fragile things when you know where to press. I began gathering records. Chloe's fake scholarship invoices, Dad's secret offshore transfers, Mom's charitable donations to her personal shopping account. Every slip-up, every stolen dollar, every shred of proof. And then I waited. 2 weeks later, Dad called, his voice sharp as ever. You've had time to think. Anna, send me the $137,000 or you and Ethan can kiss that wedding goodbye. I almost laughed. Actually, Dad, I said sweetly, you should probably focus on Chloe's condo first. Heard the HOAS moving forward with foreclosure. Silence. A long, sharp silence. Then a hiss. What did you do? Nothing you didn't do to yourself, I said, and hung up. That was the first domino. Within days, Chloe's condo was gone. Her car, also under Dad's name, got repossessed after Anne. Anonymous tip about unpaid loans. I could practically hear Mom screaming from 3 neighborhoods away when she found out. But the real blow hadn't landed yet. That was still coming. I had been quietly feeding every piece of documentation, every screenshot, every invoice, every lie to the one person my parents feared the most, Reverend Graham, the head of the church board where Dad served as treasurer. One anonymous package. One perfect storm. 3 days later at Sunday service, Reverend Graham stood before the congregation and announced a temporary investigation into financial irregularities. I didn't even have to be there to note the chaos that followed. People who used to worship my parents' reputations started whispering behind their backs. Invitations to fundraisers dried up. Dad was asked to step back from his treasurer duties until the situation is clarified. It was subtle, quiet, no headlines, no police cars. But in a community like ours, this was death by 1,000 cuts. Ethan watched me from across the kitchen that night, his gaze steady, his voice soft. You're different, he said. I nodded, sipping my coffee. No, I'm just done. And yet, deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only phase 2. Because if Richard and Leah thought losing money and respect was painful, they hadn't even begun to learn what it feels like to lose control. I was going to take the last thing they thought untouchable. The one thing they lorded over me since I was a child, their pride. The night of my cousin's engagement party was heavy with noise, laughter, and fake smiles. Everyone in the family was there. All the aunts and uncles who'd spent years whispering about how difficult I was. All the cousins who'd watched my parents parade Chloe around like royalty while treating me like furniture. I hadn't planned on going, but fate sometimes it delivers the stage right to your feet. 2 hours before the party, I walked into the hall with Ethan by my side. I could feel the ripple go through the crowd when people saw me. The black sheep who had apparently run off and ruined her own life. And there they were, Richard and Leah, standing near the buffet like they owned the air everyone breathed. Chloe was with them, shimmering in a gold dress, sipping champagne like nothing had changed. I walked past them without a word. The program began. People clapped, and I waited. My palms were sweating. But my heart was steady, cold, and sharp. Because tonight wasn't about shouting. Tonight wasn't about begging them to acknowledge me. Tonight was about dismantling them piece by piece. When the speeches ended, the host handed me the mic. A few words from the bride's cousin, they said cheerfully, oblivious. I stepped up slowly, my heels tapping on the marble floor, my voice soft at first. I wasn't going to speak tonight, I said, scanning the crowd. But since everyone I grew up with is here, maybe it's time for the truth. Richard stiffened. Leah's smile faltered. Chloe froze, her glass midair. You all know my parents, I continued, nodding at them. The proud couple who raised the perfect family. But what you don't know, I held up a thick folder in my hand, is what they've done to make it look that way. I opened the folder, pulling out printed screenshots and invoices, holding them high where everyone could see. Here are the charitable donations they bragged about, in church directly deposited into Chloe's shopping fund. Here's the scholarship Chloe flaunted, the one stolen from another student. Here are the offshore transfers that helped them dodge paying a cent in taxes while pretending to sacrifice for us. Gasps echoed through the room. And then I looked directly at my mother. You laughed at me when Dad kicked me at my engagement. You told me to eat dirt because that's all I deserved. My voice cracked but didn't waver. But now everyone sees the dirt you've buried yourselves in. People began murmuring. Phones were out. Photos snapped. Documents passed hand to hand. My parents' friends, the ones they used to dine with, were whispering behind them now. Leia's face turned ghost white. Richard reached out trying to grab the folder from my hand, but Ethan stepped forward, blocking him. "Touch her, and you'll regret it," Ethan said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. I turned to Chloe, whose smirk was finally gone. "That condo you loved so much, foreclosed. The car you paraded around, repossessed. And the perfect reputation Dad built for this family. Consider it gone." Someone in the crowd muttered, "I can't believe this." Another said, "All those donations stolen." And then it happened. My parents' oldest friends, the ones they used to brag to, stepped away from them like they were contagious. That was when I smiled. Not out of joy, out of finality. "Here's the thing," I said, lowering the mic, my voice calm and steady. "You spent your entire lives teaching me I had no value. Tonight, everyone knows who the real trash is." I set the mic down and walked out hand in hand with Ethan, leaving behind a room buzzing with betrayal and disbelief. By the next morning, my parents' phones were blowing up with calls from neighbors, church leaders, even the bank. Every mask they'd worn for decades, gone in one night. Weeks later, word spread that they'd been removed from the church board, blacklisted from their social circles, and slapped with financial audits. Chloe moved back in with them, her glamorous lifestyle dismantled. They wanted me on my knees. Instead, I left them crawling in the ruins they built for themselves. And for the first time in my life, I felt free.